Hi guys, and welcome to week 6. In this week, we're going to cover multi-directional speed development for sports performance. So it comes to our third week of this 3-week block where we've been focusing on running speed and acceleration qualities, and we're just going to tie it in together in this last one where we're going to run through the multi-directional elements of that. So there'll be a little bit of crossover. It won't be too long, and I just want to get a good, firm grasp understanding on the key elements of change of direction and multi-directional speed, which we focus on. So going back to the slide from the last presentation where we talked about linear and multi-directional speed, today's presentation, we're going to be focusing more on multi-directional speed. So there are three key components of that, and that's acceleration, deceleration, and change of direction. So as I mentioned, the three qualities, when we're looking at multi-directional speed, we're looking at the ability to transition quickly between multiple planes of movement. We're looking to change our displacement over a certain area and end up in a different direction. And as I mentioned, it's made up of those three qualities: deceleration, change of direction, and acceleration. Now, deceleration in a multi-directional speed refers to a reduction in speed or a lowering of your speed of movement. Deceleration is the initial component which occurs during change of direction and allows us to prepare to move our body in a different direction. What's important to understand about deceleration is the quicker that we can actually decelerate our body, the quicker we can re-accelerate and change our plane of movement. And so what's really important to understand here is it's not necessarily about being really fast and explosive, but how well can we absorb force. And that really comes from developing good strength levels, not having strength deficits, and in particular developing really good eccentric strength. As I mentioned about the force absorption, deceleration really equals force absorption. So the better we can absorb force, the better we can produce it. And that's a really key component. It's almost like a prerequisite for multi-directional speed, is that we need to have really good deceleration qualities. And as I said, that sort of stems from the eccentric development. If we get our strength training right in the initial phases, we start to tap into this early training effect anyway. The next phase, which will occur after we've decelerated our body's movement, is the change of direction, which refers to the ability in which for someone can move their center of mass in a different direction to what they were previously traveling in. There are two main, avenues or ways in which we can change direction, and they are cuts, which involves pushing off the instep of the outside leg, so the leg furthest away from the direction of movement, to move in the opposite direction or a different direction of movement. The crossover step refers to the outside leg crossing over the midline of the body to rotate the center of mass in the opposite direction. And so what we commonly see is cuts are really driven from offensive plays involving short changes of direction, and can also be involved in defensive plays in basketball settings when potentially guarding or anything like that. Crossover movements are tend to what we see more on football fields or soccer fields where there's more space. It involves sort of a turnover where the ball goes down the other end. It involves a longer acceleration period, and a crossover step will occur. Basically, it allows for more time for the step to take place, and more speed to be generated during the acceleration phase. Whether a cut is more of a reposition of the body. We'll go through more demonstrations of that in the practicals. When we're looking at acceleration in a change of direction setting, it's going to occur after deceleration has already occurred and expressed in different angles of movement. Now, this form of acceleration is dictated by two main factors, and that is the initial ability to relax and decelerate, and then the ability to respond to a stimulus that requires a change in direction. And so in this case, the acceleration isn't about our typical linear acceleration qualities, whilst they still hold their place. It's actually how well the athlete has the ability to uptake the information around them to respond to the stimulus provided, and then able to change direction. And so this form of acceleration actually comes more down to motor processing and processing our environment around us. And that's why commonly we can see that people might perform really well and perform with what is perceived agility and perceived responsiveness in games, but actually struggles in testing scenarios, or vice versa, why people would test really well and not necessarily perform really well. And it's the transference of this real world application of acceleration, which is the uptake and processing of information. And so I just want to differentiate between as we're labeling acceleration, what that actually refers to in this context. Now, when we're looking at the cutting, we can see here that the offensive player has the ball, he's planting his right foot and he's pushing off his inside edge. So I really want you to focus on the offensive player with the ball here. The center of mass leads the direction, so we can see his center of mass, which is just around his logo on his chest, is moving in the direction, or at least it's on the side of the direction relative to his right foot, which is planted. The weight is on the inside edge of that foot. We want to see a shin angle leaning in the direction we want to go. So his right shin angle is moving in the direction he wants to cut. The pushing leg plants before the center of mass moves. So what we need to focus on is we need to focus on planting the foot in contact with the ground and then allowing the center of mass to reposition itself. We want the center of mass low to the ground. We also want the hips low to the ground, and this allows for explosive movement. So we'll cover off athletic base, which is a key component to that. And that's essentially exposing the athlete to a starting position, which allows them to move in any direction. So very important for offensive plays. When we're looking at the crossover KPIs, we're looking for very similar things. We're still trying to move the center of mass in a certain direction. So the center of the mass always has to dictate where we're heading. The shin angle has to lean in the direction of movement, and these are key indicators for if we're going to move in that direction effectively or not. We also want the center of mass low to the ground and the hips low to the ground in the crossover. There are some slight variations we want to look for too, and these include the outside knee drawing a 45-degree line up of the body. So if we look at that player with the ball at the moment, we want his left knee to continue to rise on a 45-degree angle across his body, and we want that to reach his hip height after push-off. So once that left foot has pushed off the ground, we want that knee to come up across the body and get to a hip height. That's going to allow for a nice stride length to continue his next step. What we want to look for there, once the knee has crossed the midline of the body, then we want to see the inside foot. In this case, the right foot will pivot. We want that to occur after the knee crosses. If that occurs beforehand, what tends to happen is that they're using their inside foot, which is an inefficient movement pattern, and they're not using that power from the outside foot. If we think back to the footwork we did the other day, using the inside edge of that ball of the big toe to push off, they're going to get a lot more power pushing off that left foot and exposing that across the body than pushing off the fifth metatarsal on that right foot. So that's a really key thing we want to look for. Does the outside leg cross the body before the inside leg does the work? In this case, the inside leg should really be trailing. Okay, so what I want to go into now is just agility. And I want to create some context about what agility is and how we differentiate it. Essentially, agility is just the expression of multidirectional speed influenced by an external stimulus. This would include things like defending, reactive to the offensive players' movements, errant ball movements, so ricochets, loose balls, spillages, that sort of stuff, and then random objects flying. So this might be a more of a unique one, but it might be in outdoor settings, perhaps races and stuff where different objects are in the way. All these things are creating what we call that external stimuli. And so agility just refers to our ability to uptake this information, process it, and then move according to it. And there are a couple of ways we can enhance it. We can enhance it by improving the change of direction qualities. So that's one side of the equation. And the other side is our ability to respond to the external influences. So it's our ability to process the information around us. If we're able to uptake more information, be aware of all the different things that are happening around us, our ability or our vision is improved. With that improved vision, we're able to process the information at a faster rate and therefore able to make decisions and respond to that stimuli at a faster rate. So one equation is proving the change of direction qualities, and the other equation is improving the external stimuli processing. How do we do that? Well, different to the change of direction stuff where it's quite rudimentary and it's quite drill-based, it's really a case of progressing this stuff into game-like environments, so practicing the game, playing the game, and then exposing them to more chaotic environments, so perhaps small-sided games, reducing the playing field, that sort of stuff, where you're increasing the pressure greater than what would be expected in the game. And that's going to create a same overload training response, just like any of our other training protocols. And so just to finish up with this stuff, I just want to talk about sort of, real and stage or what sort of athletes and general populations perceive agility as and what it actually is. I just really want to refine these. On the left, we can see true agility. So we can see an offensive playmaker in both rugby and basketball there, making different moves. And those situations are requiring the defenders to react to that stimuli. So in this case, for the defender, the stimuli is the player with the ball and trying to stop them. So they're reacting to that. And they're trying to do it, and they're trying to apply those change of direction principles. the person with the ball is reacting to how the defensive players are set up. They're actually in a position to drive the decision making. So it is still agility because they still are reacting to behaviours in space and stimulus around them, but it's a different type of agility to what we look for in the defensive. So we have offensive and defensive agility, which have those slightly different elements. The picture on the right, I want to get firmly understood. These are not agility. There are predetermined environments in which a course is laid out, despite there being a leash in the first one where you could argue that the lady in the blue is following the lady in the white or reacting to the lady in the white. The environment is too set up to create a predetermined path, so therefore we're not getting that reactive stimuli element and we're just practicing change of direction qualities. And the reasons why we don't like to get too involved with these drills is because not only that is that they start to take away the true change of direction quality. So when you see the work we do, it is quite mundane, it is quite boring, but it's specifically working on those KPI elements that we're trying to focus on with those change of direction qualities. So we try not to blend the two too much. We're going to get that reactive stimuli in small-sided games, and we're going to get that change of direction quality in good, strong, rudimentary drills. So the external factors that we need to consider as well for physical development are the same things that we talked about in the previous week with the speed and acceleration. The strength and power development is can be really critical. And in this case, there's a big element on eccentric strength. So the ability to absorb that speed and absorb that strength is going to have really good carryover to both change direction qualities because of that deceleration factor and agility qualities. Training age and experience is still going to come up into play with it. So how much have they been exposed to this form of training before? Have they played multiple sports where perhaps if you're working with someone's soccer and they've got a basketball background, that's going to be fast tracked than someone who's just played soccer and maybe done some cross-country running. Again, body types, those with smaller bodies, shorter legs, lower center of mass are going to be more find a lot of this stuff easier than those taller, longer levers. And creating strategies for those athletes is going to be really important too. Mobility and stability still works the same way as it does for the linear qualities. We need to make sure that those mobile joints really have really good range of motion. Those stability joints have really good stability and control. And the other thing that I've listed here is that we really want to make sure the development of linear speed and acceleration qualities has been achieved, or where are they at with that? And what we want to focus on, if they haven't been achieved, then we're probably going to put more of our eggs in that basket, focusing on developing those qualities first and getting a trickle-down effect to the multi-directional speed, than just focusing purely on the multi-directional speed until that's been addressed. So in terms of programming assessment, so the key exercise programming considerations we need to make for the multi-directional work is we need to incorporate lateral-based movements. So we need to get them moving laterally and we need to be exposing them to that. So that might be simple things like lateral lunges, Copenhagen or adductor holds, which you can see in the image there. Anything that's going to start to strengthen that lateral musculature and prepare them for those movements is going to be really important. We need to have a skills focus. So we need to be putting in stuff that's allowing them to explore those movement patterns that are lateral. So this could be things like lateral skips, lateral marches and stuff, which seem really mundane and pointless in their activity as they're so far away from both the sport-specific movements and any of the linear development qualities. They're a great way to bridge and expose athletes to different things. As I mentioned earlier, we want to have an eccentric focus, especially at the start. So we want to develop a good robustness and tick that box off early of good eccentric strength. And we need to make sure they have a high mobility and stability focus. So I mentioned a lot previously with the cut and crossover positions, we need to make sure they're getting into a low position. A lot of athletes struggle with this just from basic mobility and stability factors. So exposing them through low intensity lateral based drills early on with eccentric focuses on good ranges of motion is a really great starting spot. So things like our lateral lunges, our lateral slides, adductor holds, lunge walks, all those sorts of things are going to be really effective. In terms of assessments, the 505 test, which is a personal preference for me, a 5-10-5, which is a modification to the 505, the reactive Y test, so that's more of an agility-based one where you run through a light gate and then the light gate will give you a stimulus to either turn left or right. The best one, in my opinion, is a combination of the 505 test and the 10-meter acceleration test. And what this does is it gives us our change of direction deficit profile. So for those that aren't familiar, the 505 test records a change of direction over 10 meters And we're able to measure this for both left and right sides. And then we compare that to a straight line, 10 meters. And so what we do is we take the left leg change direction over 10 meters and the 10-meter straight time, and we take out the deficit. So it might be 0.43 of a second difference. We do the same thing with the right side and we compare it to the straight line. And if that deficit is significantly different to the left side, then we know we have an asymmetry. And so we start to profile whether this might be an injury risk or a performance risk or perhaps a performance bias where they've developed change of direction qualities really good. This is really quite common in baseballs who are always pushing off and heading in one direction. So it's a really important, really effective way to look at it. If I'm looking for reactive work, the Y test is a good starting point, again, to profile athletes and start to build information. But a lot of the research, especially from what's coming out of Fusion Sports, some of my previous consulting with them, is that what really works effectively is finding things as specific to the skill and task as possible. So in rugby, chase and tackle situations, they're really effective with the Fusion system because you can set the timing gates up in any which way. But from a profiling perspective and from trying to build an athlete database or build some normative data to assess and test, the 505 test with a 10-meter straight line comparison is going to be really effective. In terms of the tools, I've touched on some of them. Cuts and crossover, repetitive, rudimentary work is going to be really important. So motor skill development in that area. Lateral wall drills can be really effective. Incorporating deceleration drills as well. Bands, chords, jumps, bounds, and hops are all going to be really good tools to help utilize development of these qualities, obviously applying it in a lateral environment. In terms of strength, we want to tick off some isometric first to expose them to that range of motion, develop that stability. Slow eccentric strength is going to be really important. Abduction and adduction exercises are going to have a huge place, especially around the hips. Cable hip machines can be really effective to develop some of those intrinsic muscle controls, and lateral sled marches are also a really good one. So anything where we're starting to take that plane of movement in a different direction. Medicine balls can also be really effective too, especially for developing some rotational power as well. So just to finish up, guys, a couple of recommended resources. In terms of creating a little bit of more context around the crossover and cutting positions, I've got a couple of copies of the Exos Mentorship Manual, so I'll bring them in and we'll get some copies of that so you guys can have some resources in that regard. Any research from Warren Young or Jeremy Shepherd is going to be really awesome. They've done some fantastic profiling from a testing perspective and also from understanding the quality development of these tasks. And if you're looking for sort of some shorter, sharper information, there's three names that two Australian based. So Roger Fabry runs a speed and agility academy up in Sydney. Joseph Coyne's done some work for Chinese athletes. He's done a lot more in terms of linear athletics, but has a really good approach to lateral movements as well. And Brett Bartholomew from the United States puts up some really useful content on Instagram. I genuinely try not to filter too much, but try to avoid the guys that are using lots of tools. What I commonly find is the more tools that are used, the more confusion is created for the athlete. The simpler we can keep the tools and the simpler we can keep the exercise, the simpler the motor task, and we progress those tools later on. Brett does a really good job with that. Hopefully those resources help. Lastly, here, the reference list. So again, I'll bring in those copies of the mentorship manuals and we can get our hands on them and start diving into them a little bit bigger and better. So on Friday, guys, we're going to go through the practical. So we'll cover both some linear and lateral change of direction qualities and acceleration qualities and start to link the few together and start to build on a bit of a session plan. See you all then, guys. Cheers.